Kath, I was just going to say with regards to the RNIB working group as well, that they get people.
Actually, what I'd just like to add in there is that if you've been doing post-it notes outside, you will have met the lovely Veronica Germelina from Bunnyfoot, and Veronica did some amazing research for us at AbilityNet, where I used to work. And if you don't mind me paraphrasing, would you like to do it, Veronica, or shall I?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, in it, what Veronica's research found out is that when she went off and talked to people with access needs about what kind of phone they used, what emerged is that word of mouth was really, really, really important to people. So to get a phone, you'd be more likely to go and talk to a friend with a similar access need rather than go in the shop. Now this is really exciting because of social media, because all of a sudden you've got a chance for that conversation to kind of go out a lot broader. So while there's lots of issues with points of sale, like people kind of like have learned to kind of like use their own networks and stuff.
Okay. Another question? No. Yes, you.
My understanding of briefing we did on the topic of Apple is that things like VoiceOver and Rotor are actually, in terms of the code, incredibly easy to implement. Just a few blobs of code you can have them. So my question is, how commonly do developers actually implement these features in their apps, and what can be done to get more of them to implement?
You like that one, Kath? Yeah, or Leonie? Yeah.
Funny enough, Kath and I were talking about this on the way over here this evening. Apple have actually done a pretty bloody good thing. They've made their toolkit for developers accessible by default. So if you're creating an app and you use the buttons, the sliders, the widgets, whatever that Apple provide as part of their toolkit, they're accessible by default. And that's made a hell of a difference, because I've just got an iPhone in the past few months, and I'm discovering for the first time since I lost my sight that the majority of apps are, if not completely accessible, more or less completely usable. And that's a real turnaround, and that simple thing that Apple did by just making their toolkit accessible by default has made a tremendous difference. They've also made it very easy, so if you're making custom controls, custom kind of widgets for your interface, it's really just a matter of ticking a few boxes in the interface developer to make those things accessible, certainly with VoiceOver and magnification on iDevices. So if they've done anything, that's probably the most powerful thing that they've done to make it possible to make apps accessible easily.
Did that kind of answer your question as to how often it's being done?
Yeah, but the sounds of it then, most developers are implementing it, which is a really good thing.
Yeah. Well, it's not 100% yet, but I'd say we're probably 60, 70, maybe 75% of apps are accessible enough to be usable for the majority of tasks. So yeah.
For Apple anyway.
For Apple anyway.
Android's different.
And Vodafone, of course, does sell Apple products. Ash.
Talking about the Apple product, I've, happy Apple user and iPhone user for 18 months or so, and just by playing around with the settings menus, I discovered a 3-touch action which allowed me to zoom. And so all the hassle I had with composing text and reading notes, which you can't otherwise zoom, was solved by that 3-touch action, which I did not know it supported. So the point of sale argument, I find, is useful. Of course it is, but it's sort of like usability in use, I think, Nigel Bevan's term. We must have an accessibility in use. There's a changing need. And I had a changing need as my eyesight worsened, and I couldn't compose text comfortably, etc. So there is a point, I think, about discoverability of these features, even if you have them, but you aren't exposing them in some way. And we aren't detecting the problems users are facing at runtime, then we're missing a trick. And I think there's still some scratching of the heads which dev need to do. But on a related point, I think, on a related point, having worked in UX for donkey's years, I've worked with some very good people who haven't read or know 9241 or then 13407. Will 8878 go the same route? That actually, we can work very well in accessibility, but not know the buzzwords, not have read the standard. And what happens next? Is there going to be an ISO version?
So, okay. So starting off with where you ended, so my slides have been seen by people all over the world. The Japanese wanted to adopt 8878 as a Japanese standard back in February. The Australians are really, really keen. For something to become an ISO standard, it kind of needs to be out there for a while. There's something I love about actually the way these rules work, because I love user testing. So I think you should look at it this way at the moment. BS8878, lovely product, has been user tested. And we tested it with loads of people who are experts, but what we really want to know is, does this thing actually work in the wild? So Leonie is getting 8878 into BetaGov. We've got folks in Royal Mail, all sorts of organisations who are, if you like, trying it out and seeing if in reality it's working for them. And actually, you know, people said, why aren't you writing a book about it, to me? And I said, I don't want to write a book about it. I want some case studies, and I want to collect them together, but it's going to take a while for us to get there. So you cannot do an ISO standard until a year has gone by. So, and when we were last talking about it a couple of months ago, 2 different ISO committees were fighting over who got the chance to make this into an international standard.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, but it just means there's loads of politics I've got to go through in the next kind of 6 months or so.
But I think that's the part of the question. You know,
Yeah.
standards get bogged down into this, and we talked about this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not necessarily a good thing to call it a standard, and it has all this sort of political and sort of enforcement around it. It's
Sure.
better to have something out there, out in the wild, that's much more
Yeah, I mean,
accessible.
I don't really care what you call it. The thing that the main thing that I hate about BS8878 is you have to pay £100 to get it. I don't get any of that money. Lane doesn't get any of that
Jonathan,
money.
are there like the WCAG guidelines? Do you have a cheat sheet shortened version, or is that your 16 points?
Well, actually, I've kind of got something better than that. So tonight or tomorrow, I start answering how this works in the wild on my blog.
Okay.
Because a lot of people have said, you know, it works for huge organisations, but what about SMEs? I'm now an SME, so I'm using it to create my website, and I'm actually going to be posting up there in a series what I did and how this thing has actually helped me. You know, eat your own dog food.
Fantastic.
Yeah, at John Hassel Inclusion. Come have a look.
I think that's also something, John, you mentioned in your presentation as well, you know, sometimes you've got to get something out there. You know, version 1 of the Apple, I think you were saying, you know, cut and paste, it wasn't there. Fine, silly mistake in retrospect, but you know what, it got it out there, it got the criticism, that got fed back in, and the product got improved, and I think that's where 8878 needs to be, or needs to go through that process before we look at evolving it into an international standard. I think it's really important to get that user testing in and just make it better. It was a first attempt, I think it's great. It could be even better. But I think,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you tell us,
Fantastic.
basically.
Okay. Now, gentleman in the striped shirt, and then
Do you think that Apple's decision to make develop accessibility kit available to developers sort of will in future demonstrate that there's no need for accessibility to always be playing catch up and always sort of harking on at the latest technological developments to make things accessible, where it just become a de facto standard rather than an enforced standard?
I mean, I don't think it should be about technology at all. I mean, I think we have all the technology we need, apart from very extreme examples, to do really good science. I mean, it's about the will and the desire to get it done. You know, and to go back to Ash's point, you know, there's a balance there between, you know, how much accessibility do you build into the interface. So it's political will, and it's money, and it's what makes the money for the company. So I don't think it's about technology. It's about getting the word out there and being inclusive and having the will to do it.
And can I put just a note of caution? Leonie's slide is not all about screen readers. Apple have voiceover in their products. That is it. There is a few other kind of good things, but there are loads of people who have actually, there are millions of people who have accessibility needs that product does not help at all.
Yeah.
So you really need to think about, when you're saying accessible to whom?
Yeah.
And actually, even Apple have got a hell of a long way to go in actually trying to make something which is actually inclusive. So just bear that in mind.
Judith, did you have something to add to that one?
Yeah, in terms of your question, you were talking about if you were going to start doing, playing catch up. But really what we're looking is at the ideal in user experience is you start doing your research before you even have your product early on. So if you're doing your research early on, people with access needs, then slowly we're going to get to the situation where, oh, we're going live next week, should we do some accessibility testing? So it's, as well as education for people who are manufacturing these products, it's about our ideal user research life cycle.
Okay, the lady with the long hair.
Hi, I work in a UX research agency, and one of the challenges we often have is that clients come to us asking us to test for people with access needs, but they won't have the budget set aside to do big studies. So a few people mentioned tonight maybe including one or two participants with access needs. In your experience, what is the ideal percentage and what is the ideal number to cover what has been, what we've rightly pointed out? Is it a big variety?
Judith, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. I think if you're looking to cover every access need, then you're looking at a very large study. So on a practical level, it's trying to pick things off. So every time you're doing testing, include people from different groups. I mean, there's different things you can do if you've developed your personas who've got access needs. You can do cognitive walkthroughs with those personas. You can do heuristic reviews and include accessibility audits. And with each stage of testing, include people with different access needs. If you want to cover everything off, say you'd be covering a lot, because even if you think about, say for example, take somebody who's got motor disabilities, it's not just about what they can functionally do, it's about how they're behaving as a user, so all the usability issues, their personal identity and relationship with technology. So if a client wants to just do user testing to make their product totally accessible, that's not enough. You need to talk to them about the whole life cycle, but you can get them started and say, well, this will help a lot of people.
Kath, what about at Vodafone? How are you doing it at Vodafone?
What we're doing is that we are, whenever we can, it's not in every single study and research activity at the moment that goes on within the team, but we're trying to, I'm not giving you these as this is the exact ratio, but say for example, we do small surgeries where we just want to test a design idea, and we might get 6 people to come in a day, try an interface out for us and tell us whether they like it or not. We might put 2 with an access need out of the 6. So, and again, I, completely agree with what you just said, surprisingly enough. I'd say just to try out doing that. And I think the thing is that I think that there's a lot of fear around including people with access needs, because it's like, oh, we do it that way, we're not going to get it right. And what I'd say is just get people in, there's an amazing website called Just Ask by Sean Henry, and it's for UX. There's a lot of accessibility information out there is for developers, and it's not relevant to what you guys do if you're talking about user experience. If you look at that, what it will do is it will tell you about how to communicate with someone, what you need to set up, and I'd say just get people in and give it a try.
Thanks very much.